Well, I mean, I've done what I always do, which is to write the songs on my acoustic guitar in a very simple fashion, and then bring them to people and work with them. We have not performed as Swans since 2000, 19, 18 or something. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this is a different Swans. I mean, pretty much there's a lot of people that carried over from the chunk of time, which is about 8 years when we made 4 albums together. But there's a new person involved, Dana Schechter, who also played in Angels of Light. But we just recorded this new album. We rehearsed for a month in Berlin and then started recording. So the songs already transmuted somewhat, or a great deal actually, from what I had on acoustic guitar. And I suspect that when we rehearse now, I'm leaving Friday, we'll rehearse for a month. I suspect that they'll extend and find new avenues, even more so when we start rehearsing and then when we play live, certainly. I don't want the songs to stay static. To me, there's no reason to do that. And I don't ever want to just replicate what's on a record. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's all different, just evidence and points in time. The song exists on an acoustic guitar. That's one point in time. Then it exists how it's recorded in the studio. Then it exists how it's mixed. And then it exists in different ways when it starts getting performed live. The effect of COVID was just, like everyone else, it was just stasis, and which is pretty unfamiliar to me, because I realized with a shock that I had been working on this schedule, this self-imposed regimen since around 1983, where you record an album and then you rehearse it and then you play it live, and then you work out songs, you record another album, and it just goes on like that. And there's always this kind of pressure to keep moving, and which is what I've always done and which I've grown accustomed to. But just suddenly finding myself with my feet in buckets of cement was pretty strange. But it was also possibly fertile. It helped me kind of examine myself more closely as a writer, and perhaps I came out better on the other side. But I'm looking forward to touring now.
What did you learn about yourself as a writer?
Just that I have to rethink everything constantly, and I have to dig deeper. You just have to always dig deeper.
That's been a constant, though, right? Throughout your career. That's not new for COVID. So.
I mean, my first instinct when you asked that question was, what did I learn about myself as a writer? And I was going to say that I completely suck. but I don't think that's true, although it feels like it often. But I just always try to just find something that's true in the words, and for better or worse, that's what I do.
One thing that I really discovered about myself during the pandemic was how much of what I do and what I'm able to do is a pure product of momentum. For me, for somebody who used to go into the office every day, it's getting up at 6 a.m. and then getting on a train. That's only something that I can keep doing because I've been doing it for so long. And it's really, it becomes incredibly hard to motivate if all of a sudden you've been static for a while.
Yeah. And I was, I guess I suffered from a good amount of hubris in that I thought I could just exist on my own. I didn't need anybody else for anything. I always thought, well, I can always just sit there and write, but it didn't work that way for me. I realized that, yes, I can sit there and write, but I need interaction with musicians and even an audience, and it's just integral to who I am now. So that was kind of maddening. But, to complain about it is really crazy because so many other people suffered such great amounts, If you realize that I think in the first year, 20,000 people in New York died from COVID or something, just in New York City. So, I mean, it's And my ex-wife is a emergency room nurse, and she had some stories that you can imagine. So
I live in Queens myself, so it was really, March and April 2020 it was just a complete nightmare. There were images of Walmart trucks being loaded up with bodies.
Yeah, and we had also. I don't like to get too personal in interviews, but we had my wife now, we had a baby in April of that year. So it was quite an extraordinary experience.
One thing I've ended up talking to a lot of musicians about, I don't have children myself, but I can really appreciate this, is that when you're somebody who's been doing this for certainly as long as you have, and when you're on, it's your job to go on tour and to leave the family for a bit, you really end up valuing those moments when you can be home. So maybe there is there's an upshot to this at the end of the day, that you were able to be there for your young child.
Yeah, I was never with my two other children who are much, much older. I was never able to spend so much time with them at that stage. So that was interesting. It still is interesting. In fact, immediately before clicking on your link here, I was just wiping shit out of my son's butt. I did wash my hands, however.
At the top of the conversation, I was talking about some of the differences between interviewing somebody in person and on the computer, but there are these things that you counter from time to time. And, maybe it's like putting your hands in the earth, or maybe it's wiping shit out of somebody else's ass that really that recenter you as far as, remembering your place in the human experience.
Yeah. And also, I'm not young. So as your body begins to show signs of aging, you're reminded of your mortality constantly, which is a healthy thing, because I wish that I had not been so arrogant in my youth and had death right in front of my face constantly, because it not only makes life more urgent, but it immediately engenders humility, which is a very valuable thing to possess.
What do you mean when you say you had death in front of you constantly?
I wish that I had. It comes in an instant, and it's coming. It's going to happen. And I think that makes life much more poignant and more important, and it's necessary. So
I could be wrong, and I'm certainly reading between the lines as far as the pieces of you that you've chosen to put out in the world, both through the work that you make, but also interviews. It doesn't strike me that thinking about mortality is that new of a phenomenon for you.
No, perhaps not.
Certainly it's played a role in your work. Effectively since the beginning, right?
I guess. I don't even remember the beginning, to be honest.
I was reading something that you did years ago, and you cited the inevitability of, you were considerably younger at the time, but you cited the inevitability of death as being a pretty big motivating factor for your art even back then.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, it is. I always I want to get one more piece of work out, whether it's some fiction or some music that is just, I use the word, I don't know why I use the word undeniable, that it's just the best possible thing I could ever do. And I always strive for that. And I'm never happy. Even the current record, I just can't listen to it. Everything's flawed. I don't know, I'm unable to be objective. It's not good enough. I have to try something new each time.
And that in and of itself is a motivator, right? There is something, it sucks, right? I feel the same way. I can't go back and read anything I've written or interviews that I've done. But there is something motivating in knowing that you haven't quite reached that point that you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm not sure I will, but I'll keep trying.
Do you feel like you've been getting closer as you progressed?
I feel that way when I'm in the process, when I'm working with, when I first write a song, that's very exciting and interesting. And I feel like, wow, that's really has a lot of potential. And then when I work with people, sometimes it's ecstatic, when we're just first playing the thing for the first time in a way that feels right. It feels absolutely amazing. and then it's recorded, and there, at certain points during the mixing, it's just like, I can't believe how good this is. And then after working on the mix for sometimes days on end and finishing it, maybe it sounds great, and then inevitably a month later it just sounds dead. And that's just sort of what happens.
For me, the self-doubt really increases when I'm in silence. When I don't have things in my life to distract me, that's when I can really kind of wallow in those really destructive and counterproductive places. But I mean, it sounded like you, when time came to sit down and start writing, that you were still able to do that in earnest.
Yeah. Yeah, it happened. And I'm grateful for it. I was randomly driving, and I was driving and randomly on the radio. No, wait, I put on a Dylan CD. It was a couple albums ago. It was a particularly what's the word I'm looking for? A song with a lot of words, just tons of just verbiage. And I thought, wow, that's just amazing. It's so incredible. What a writer. And it really inspired me. And I came home and I wrote the song, The Beggar, not inspired by Dylan's writing. I don't want to write like Dylan, for God's sake. But it was just something about being connected to that, whatever that source is where words come from. Having heard him do it, I thought I can do it. And I wrote those words.
Yeah, so much of, early in people's careers when they're making art of any kind, so much of it is really a process of imitation. And through that, like if you're good enough and if you're lucky finding your own voice over time, are there still people though that you really strive to, whether it's, specifically write like them or at least capture some of what they've been able?
No, I don't try to write like anybody, and I never have. And I don't try to write like Dylan. All I'm saying is that it was just the fact of those words flowing in such a evocative way was inspirational to me, not to try to write in any sense like him. That would be inauthentic of me, would be a disservice to myself as well. So, but I'm just saying that having heard him sing in the way he does, or rather narrate these days, it was just inspirational. That's all, to hear someone doing it. And that inspired me to write. I guess, that was during the pandemic too. So I don't even remember what Dylan's song or album it was. It's just a moment, One
of the things I really appreciate about the way you do, to a certain extent, put yourself out in the world on places like social media, it's clear that you still really have this very visceral interaction with music, and that you're really excited to discover things and continue to share them with other people, because I feel like that's something that a lot of people, even musicians, really kind of gravitate away from over time.
I'm in a period right now where I'm not really listening to music, and it's been a while since I've been listening seriously to any music. I did hear Diamanda Galas's new record, the name of which, of course, escapes me right now. But my manager works with her too, so I got the CD of it, and I put it on in the car driving back from New York City to where I live, and I was just blown away by it. I just thought, man, she is just the pinnacle of artistic achievement. She's just amazing. So that's the most impressive piece of music I've heard in a very long time, that record. And the new next record I just heard as well. It's been pretty inspirational. I don't seek out new music generally.
You interact with people through a place like Facebook or Instagram, is exposing these things that you hear to other people.
Oh, right. Well, my goal with the social media abomination is basically just to post about other things, anything but myself. when there's a new record, of course, I want to mention it, but I mean, I just think the solipsism of the whole thing is just revolting. But I have to do it because we need to reach our audience, and we're not garnering huge headlines in the New York Times, so I have to reach people. So that's what I use Instagram and Facebook for, etc. But yeah, so I always look for pieces of art or books I've read or other musical artists that I feel are worth noting, and I post about them. That's what I do. I just heard this. What did you think of this? Did you hear this new Lana Del Rey record?
I haven't gotten around to it. That's the what is it? There's a street under Ocean Avenue.
Yeah, I bought it. I mean, I downloaded it. I bought it. I paid for it and downloaded it, and I was kind of impressed. I could make a lot of criticisms about it, but I was kind of impressed. I thought it was pretty ambitious.
What hooked you? And like in that specific context, what does it mean to be ambitious?
The atmosphere, the arrangements in her voice, the criticism. I mean, it's her business, but it's disappointing not to be able to understand the words all the time. And I even tried an experiment. I put on her record and then I played Nico, and then I played Lucinda Williams, and just listening to different people, different female singers, and how their voices mixed. Yeah, her voice is just too quiet. I don't understand the reason for that, but otherwise, I quite liked it.
When you've been away, I mean, this was certainly for you, a fairly long stretch to go, not just between records, but performing with this group of musicians. When you have written those songs and the time comes to really start working through them, does it all just come rushing back to you all at once?
How do you mean? You mean the process, or the kind of animating force that drives things?
I would say animating force, but a little bit of everything. Is it that thing of riding a bike where everyone's there in a room and you just kind of you pick up where you left off?
Yes, indeed. But when we recorded, as I say, when we recorded this album, we rehearsed together for a month before we went in the studio. We rehearsed the songs or learned how to perform the songs. So yeah, that was exciting and interesting. And I'm a bit terrified of going on stage. It's going to be different. It won't be as loud as we have been in the past, for various reasons. And the instrumentation is quite different. So I have a lot of ideas in my head how it's going to be, but of course, I'll just have to see once I sit down in the room with 6 people. I'm pretty confident it'll be good. I mean, I've worked with each of these people, either as a group or individually, for years. So
when the volume lowers and, when there's less sound and noise in the backgrounds, it seems to me that the lyrics end up doing a lot more of the heavy lifting and take center stage in a way that, perhaps they weren't when you were younger and louder.
It depends on the record, but the records that I did with Swans after we reformed and then toured, those were centered around the kind of aural, AURAL experience of the music, just the music, and these long instrumental passages. And words are important, of course, but they were kind of the signposts along the way. Whereas now I'm not really interested in doing what we did anymore, just 35-minute songs. It's about the words and of course the atmosphere and the music around the words, but the words are central.
I'm really curious about this concept of, I guess, effectively treating each album as though it's your last. Obviously, there's a very kind of pragmatic or practical aspect of that, in that anything we put out into the world might be our last, and that becomes more and more so the case as we get older. But how does that end up being a sort of a motivating factor, and what impact does that have on the music itself?
Well, I mean, it doesn't make the music darker or anything. In fact, maybe it makes me want it to scream with joy. But It makes it more urgent to me. I keep thinking that, I'm done. I just don't have it anymore. And then I sit down, start fiddling around on my guitar, and before you know it, I've written a song. And so I'm just going to keep doing it until I'm unable to.
Is that a relatively new thing, or has it basically happened after the end of each album?
Yeah, I guess it's happened periodically. But there were times when I was just pumping it out, and then I took a break for a while and found a new kind of place to start writing from, and things opened up again. But it's kind of a terrifying thing as someone who has to make things to feel like they exist, to maybe face not being able to make things anymore. So
what is that relationship between making things and existence to you? Is it putting something out into the world and having people react to it, or?
It's everything. It's making things. It's making useless things. I think the definition, according to Oscar Wilde, the definition of art. But I want to make. I'm an artist. It's not a grandiose thing. It's just what I am. It's what I do. And it's been since I was, pretty young. First visual art, and then music. It's all I know. I have to make stuff. It's just what it is.
Let me reframe that question. Where in the process do you find the meaning? Is it's in the creation itself?
Yeah, I guess so. But that doesn't just end. As I say, particularly in the last version of Swans, the one that lasted from 2010 to 2018, I guess it was. It was constantly revivifying itself. I mean, the music was constantly shifting, changing, and developing live on stage from night to night, or certainly month to month. So that was incredibly invigorating. It was like just being lit all the time. But then, after that ended and then the pandemic hit, then it's a whole different thing. So it's exciting. I guess to use a pretty banal word, it's exciting to write a song and look at it on the page and sing it and feel like, wow, that's really good. That's really exciting to do. And not good in the sense that it should get some kind of a kudos, but good in the sense that it actually has resonance.
Something that probably took me too long to figure out is the role that metaphor plays in, songwriting and literature, or that symbolism plays in art, is finding some sort of, is like getting to that approximation of things that for whatever reason we just don't have the words for.
Yes, I agree. That's like St. John of the Cross trying to describe his relationship to God.
That's been a bit of a theme that's been a big theme for a lot of your work, is your relationship with God. And it certainly plays a role in this record. Has that changed in a major way over the years?
I'm not sure that it's. I'm just as stunned by existence, really stupefied by just the fact of existence as I ever was. And sometimes I'll be doing some kind of mundane task, and I have this kind of out of body experience where I'm just convinced that at any minute the fabric of the air is going to rip apart and reveal what's really there. And of course, it never does, but there's this aching to find what's really there, what's really behind things. And I suppose that's a search for God. But I don't look at God as an anthropomorphic figure. So it's a bit different than many people might view the search for some kind of transcendent experience. But perhaps I'm completely wrong. Perhaps the Bible is literally true. I have no idea. But you had you had asked about meditation, and that's an important tool. But, certainly in Buddhism, or at least Zen Buddhism, for instance, there's never any mention of the word God. It's more about being and consciousness. So that's something that I might gravitate towards more than a traditional Western religious view.
It does strike me, though, that you do use the word God, which does seem to a certain extent to be a deliberate choice when describing something big and abstract and spiritual.
Yeah, I guess it's a useful word. I mean, it's an impossible word, but it can maybe point towards a feeling or a sensation or, an idea.
It seems like you may not be any closer to really kind of, I guess, figuring that out than you were when you started.
No. How could I be? It would be preposterous to claim any answers to the question.
I mean, of course, certainly over time, there are things we figure out, or at least think we figure out. We do tend to work in cycles and oftentimes, go back to where we started. But the fact that you're not any closer than you were at the beginning, does it, in a certain sense, does it make that quest futile?
No, I think it's the most important question there is. But the times when I've had a sense of, these words are so potentially corny, but the times when I've had a sense of ascendance or transcendence, they're just kind of random and they happen. And it's, certainly they're more likely to happen if you're meditating doggedly, but they also just happen. And I love them. And they've happened a great deal in performing music as well, where it's just, you're not playing and you're being played. The music is just this levitation device. And that's kind of what I live for, is those moments. And I've had that, of course, with sexual experiences with someone that's deeply loved. That is also potentially quite transcendent. So I don't know what I'm talking about now. Sorry.
I think you do. And I understand that. And I'm not somebody who performs music myself, but I'm somebody who sees a lot of it, and I can really appreciate again, this is going to sound kind of corny too, but the exchange of energy that goes on between an artist and an audience when they're playing in a room.
Yeah. I mean, we're best. I don't know how this new version is, but I presume it's going to be somewhat comparable to the last version of Swans, in that once you reach a certain state and you just give up and the sound is carrying you, that's where we want to be. And I hope we can reach that. We'll see. Breathe my breath into your head. Righteous, pure, and sour with death. What do you mean by give up? You just give up. You're playing, but you're not thinking. It's just happening. That's much like the goal of meditation. You give up. You're not thinking. The words become they're like grains of sand. They don't have any kind of meaning whatsoever, and it's just experience absolutely in the moment. But the moment feels eternal, and that's when it's the most wonderful.
Is that something that can be recreated or experienced in the actual songwriting process?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, with me, it's a slow and painful process for writing a song. Sometimes it starts with 3 words, and I don't have anything I want to say, but maybe I have a rhythm thing I'm playing on guitar, and I just have this sense that something is going to happen, and just have to keep playing it until it opens up, and suddenly, oh, there's the song. And maybe I'll have like 6 lines, and then that just burgeons and becomes a whole thing. It's sort of, I mean, I'm certainly vain of me to compare myself, but it's very similar to the way that a painter, Francis Bacon, worked. Francis Bacon, that he didn't start with an idea, but once he found an image, the thing just accrued in front of him. He followed the process and created these amazing images, but he didn't like make a sketch and say, I'm going to do this drawing of a chair with a man writhing on it. He just started painting, and it formed. And to me, that's very inspirational, actually.
As I was trying to articulate before, the comparison to some of the music as mantra, or again, using meditation as, I guess, a parallel here, is effectively playing something over and over until it starts to take shape. I
mean, I play my guitar in an unusual way, in that I play with downstrokes with my thumb, and open chords usually, and the guitar really resonates, and I can hear lots of overtones and notes buried in the chords that maybe I'm not even playing when I play. And that always inspires me. Working with other musicians, it's like trying to find that moment when I realized how rich and fruitful potentially that chord is. When I start working with the other musicians, it's a way of kind of bringing that to life in a bigger way.
I finally, within the last year or so, finally got to a point after years of banging my head against the wall where I actually have a daily meditation practice that is very useful to me. And the only way that I was really, or I guess a big part of the reason why I was able to crack it, is because I forced myself to, that I have to set aside a specific amount of time every morning to sit down. And this is what they tell you. You sit down and you spend that time sitting, whether or not it's working out for you. And that routine is a big part of it. When in the songwriting process, is there a sense in which you have to, is it set aside a time of day, or perform in a certain area, or perform in a certain way in order to really, for that process to be fruitful for you?
Yeah, well, I need solitude, and I need to be in my familiar space, which happens to be the office I'm in right now, and alone, of course. And I need a specific segment of time to fail. You need time to just play something incredibly stupid for a while, just to see if it leads to something else. And you just have to keep trying. And that's what I do.
Does failure mean scrapping full songs, or does failure just mean that early stage in the process before you really hit on something?
It's the latter. It's just trying, just keeping, failing and keeping trying, and then finally finding something that's worthwhile.
I appreciate your being really kind of, I guess, transparent about the frustrations around the songwriting process, because I think, this is something that we hear a lot about in art in general, and certainly music, is this idea of channeling the muse. Some of these, like, there's that classic story of Keith Richards waking up in the middle of the night with, Satisfaction, the riff from Satisfaction, or I've heard stories around, Astral Weeks of Van Morrison basically like sitting on a porch and just channeling all these words. And to me, that can actually be really counterproductive, because most of the time you sit down, it's not going to come that easy. And it can be extremely frustrating when it doesn't come.
It never comes easy for me. Never. It's it's always hard, but that's okay. It comes. It's just a very slow process for me.
Have there been times when it just doesn't come at all?
I guess so. I mean, I can't think of them right now, but I'm sure there must have been. It's been 40 years, but I can't think of any specific moments right now.
When you start to think about things, when you start to think about, your mortality, but even more immediate than your mortality, and this is something I talk to artists about all the time, is for a lot of them, there's a certain point when it's just physically not possible to tour anymore, whether it's, their hearing, or can obviously be really difficult on the body. I talked to a lot of cartoonists, a lot of people who write and draw comics on the show, and they tend to quantify the remainder of their life in the number of books they can have out there. It's a little bit, it's obviously a little bit morbid, but assuming that you can write a book
Sure.
every 4 years, that the time breaks down pretty quickly. Is that, I mean, how do you use something like that and use it as motivation when it's something that can effectively be very paralyzing?
Well, I don't think like that. I mean, I just think about, well, the next thing in front of me right now is I'm going to be doing this tour, which is going to be, in the end, it's going to be at least probably 10 months, if not a year, broken up into pieces. But so that'll be my existence for that period of time. And perhaps I'll have some songwriting ideas along the way, although usually they're discrete. They're not conjoined. I don't usually write on tour. And then when the touring's over, I'll sit down and say to myself, okay, now you have to write. And then I'll just figure out how to write. And I guess when I can't tour anymore, then that writing is all I'll do. But as I say, I have to be doing something. I have to be making things. I did think for a while that maybe I should find some kind of work that just helps other people. Just work as a assistant in a hospital or something, just help people. But that's not me.
You're somebody who, as I said, does still actively, engage with music, and you can appreciate that there is an extent to which music really does help people.
Yeah, that's one of the most rewarding things, aside from being able to make a living, is talking to people who are not, just like stuttering fan people, but actual intelligent people who thank me for the music having meant something to them in their life. That means a huge amount to me. So
something that I find that I've had to get better at in my own life is learning how to accept compliments. I've been really bad at it. If somebody will compliment something that I've done in the past that I don't feel like was my best work, my, unfortunate instinct is to kind of explain to them why it's not my best work. But you do really have to sort of learn to accept that and accept the meaning that people find in your work, even if it isn't the thing that you sought out to put down in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed sometimes when people tell me how much they love one particular record I can't stand. I just try to smile.
I don't know if you were necessarily referring to the major label record that you did. I know that was not a good experience, but with distance, are you able to find good in that? Are you able to still find, good aspects of the things that you don't particularly like?
The best thing that happened to me from that experience was that I became 100% completely self-reliant. I started my own label and did everything myself and did not need anybody at all to do what I do. I have people I work with that are associated with my label, but that was the best thing that happened with that major label record, was that it forced me to realize I'm fucked. I have zero prospects, zero money, and how can I pull myself out of this aside from jumping off a bridge? So what I did was just figured out how to make it happen myself.
It got that bad after that period.
Penniless. Not the first time or the last time, but that was a pretty sobering. Well, I wouldn't say it was sobering considering my behavior in those days, but
not literally sobering. Yeah.
It was daunting, certainly.
Is done, stripped bare of pretense, soaking his sheets while counting insects. He's a grid on the sun. He's the hate in the love. Every hole is a leak when Michael does speak. But Michael will win. There's a flame on his tongue. His words are burnt meat to muscle and red. Now Michael will cloak every wrath.